You exist because a few thousand people refuse to disappear. Not a nation, not a civilization, not even a tribe. A population so small that if they all stood together today, they wouldn't fill a modern sports stadium. And for a brief moment in human history, they may have been all that remained of our species. Every language ever spoken, every city ever built, every invention, every empire, every person you've ever known, everything may trace back to those few survivors. The strange part is that they weren't escaping a war. They weren't running from another species. They weren't fighting a plague. Their enemy was the Earth itself. Around 74,000 years ago, something happened that darkened the sky across continents, altered the climate for years, and may have pushed Homo sapiens closer to extinction than at any other point in our existence. It began with a mountain, not an ordinary volcano, one so unimaginably powerful that even today, scientists classify it among the largest eruptions our planet has ever witnessed. If events had unfolded only slightly differently, there is a good chance this video would never have existed. Neither would you. To understand why, you have to imagine a world that looked nothing like the one outside your window. Forget highways, forget nations, forget farms, forget history itself. The year is roughly 74,000 years before the present. Modern humans have existed for hundreds of thousands of years, but civilization is still unimaginably far away. There are no kingdoms, no writing, no permanent cities, only small bands of hunter-gatherers moving across enormous landscapes, following seasons, animals, rivers, and opportunity. Every day is a calculation. Where is water? Where is food? Where are the predators? Where can we sleep without becoming something else's dinner? The planet itself feels larger than it does today. Dense forests stretch beyond the horizon. Open grasslands seem endless. Ice covers vast portions of the north. Giant mammals roam nearly every continent. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, giant buffalo, massive deer with antlers wider than a person is tall. Humans are not the rulers of this world. They're simply another species trying to survive inside it. And survival is never guaranteed. A single failed hunt can mean hunger. Several failed hunts can mean death. A broken leg can become a death sentence. A harsh winter can erase an entire family. Life has always been fragile. But despite all of this, humanity is doing something remarkable. It's expanding. Small groups are slowly spreading beyond Africa into unfamiliar environments. Every generation explores a little farther, learns a little more, adapts a little better. Our ancestors aren't the strongest animals alive. They're certainly not the fastest, but they possess something unusual. They solve problems. Every challenge becomes another lesson. Every mistake becomes another tool. Every generation inherits knowledge that the previous one fought to earn. For the first time in Earth's history, intelligence itself is becoming a survival strategy, and it seems to be working. Slowly, patiently, humanity is growing. Then, thousands of kilometers away, beneath what is now northern Sumatra, pressure begins to build. Not over years, not over centuries, over tens of thousands of years. Deep beneath the Earth's crust, molten rock accumulates inside an enormous underground chamber. The chamber grows larger, hotter, more unstable. Each passing century adds more pressure. The surface remains quiet. Animals graze, forests flourish. Ancient humans pass nearby with absolutely no idea what lies beneath their feet. The Earth often hides its greatest dangers in silence. Then, one day, the silence ends. The eruption begins with earthquakes, violent enough to reshape the landscape. The ground fractures. Entire forests tremble. Rivers change course. But the earthquakes are only the warning. Moments later, the volcano tears itself apart. Imagine every nuclear weapon on Earth exploding at once. Now, imagine multiplying that energy thousands of times. Even that comparison falls short. The eruption ejects an estimated 2,800 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the atmosphere. To put that into perspective, the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, one of the most famous volcanic eruptions in modern history, released roughly 1 cubic kilometer. This eruption is in another universe entirely. A column of ash punches through the atmosphere, higher, higher still, eventually reaching the stratosphere. Ash begins drifting across Asia, then farther, much farther. Within days, enormous regions are covered beneath layers of volcanic debris. Some places receive leaves several meters of ash. Forests collapse beneath the weight. Rivers become choked with gray sediment. Plants disappear beneath suffocating blankets of dust. Animals begin dying, not because lava reaches them. Most never see the lava at all. They simply lose the ecosystems that kept them alive. The disaster doesn't end when the eruption stops. In many ways, that's when it truly begins. Millions of tons of sulfur dioxide remain suspended high in the atmosphere. Unlike ordinary clouds, these particles don't disappear after a storm. They spread across the globe. They reflect sunlight back into space. The sky changes. Days become dimmer. Temperatures begin to fall. Scientists call this a volcanic winter. The exact severity remains debated. Some climate models suggest a dramatic global cooling lasting several years. Others propose more moderate regional effects. But regardless of the precise numbers, one fact is difficult to dispute. The planet suddenly becomes far less predictable. Growing seasons shrink. Rainfall patterns shift. Entire ecosystems struggle to adapt. Imagine waking each morning beneath a pale gray sky that refuses to brighten. Imagine plants flowering at the wrong time. Animals abandoning familiar migration routes. Lakes shrinking. Forests changing. Everything your survival depends upon begins behaving differently. Now, remember, you don't have agriculture. You don't have stored food. You don't have supermarkets. Every meal still depends on nature cooperating. And nature has just changed the rules. For ancient humans, this isn't merely an environmental crisis. It's a survival crisis. Entire herds begin moving into unfamiliar territory. Fruit-bearing plants become scarce. Water sources dry up in some places and flood in others. Communities that once knew exactly where to hunt now find empty landscapes. Every successful strategy built over generations suddenly becomes unreliable. The Earth has rewritten the manual, and nobody receives a copy. The first signs aren't dramatic. They're subtle. A hunting trail that suddenly goes cold. A river that no longer holds fish. A familiar valley that falls strangely silent. At first, each group assumes it's a local problem. Maybe the animals have moved. Maybe the weather will return to normal next season. Maybe tomorrow will be better. But tomorrow becomes another difficult day. Then another. Then another. Across thousands of kilometers, small human communities begin making the same terrifying discovery. The world they understood no longer exists. Food becomes harder to predict. Travel becomes riskier. Competition intensifies, not just between humans, between every living thing still trying to survive. Predators follow shrinking herds. Herbivores crowd into the few regions where vegetation still grows. Entire ecosystems are forced into places they never occupied before, and humans find themselves trapped in the middle of it all. Imagine leading your family across a landscape you've known your entire life. You remember where water should be, where berries usually grow, where animals cross during migration, except none of it is happening anymore. The map inside your mind has become useless. Every decision carries consequences. Walk too far, and exhaustion may kill you. Stay where you are, and starvation might arrive first. This is the kind of pressure evolution cannot ignore. For generations, humanity had been learning to adapt. Now, adaptation is no longer an advantage. It's the only way to remain alive. This is where one of the greatest mysteries in human history begins. Because when geneticists examined modern human DNA, thousands of years later, they noticed something impossible to ignore. Human beings are astonishingly similar to one another, far more similar than most other mammals. Two chimpanzees living in neighboring forests often possess more genetic variation than two humans born on opposite sides of the planet. That shouldn't happen in a species that once spread across continents, unless something drastically reduced the population. Scientists call this a population bottleneck. Imagine pouring thousands of differently colored marbles into a giant container. Now imagine shaking out almost every marble until only a handful remain. Those survivors become the source of every future marble. No matter how large the collection grows afterward, it still carries only a fraction of the original diversity. Some researchers believe exactly this happened to Homo sapiens. At some point in our distant past, the breeding population may have fallen to only a few thousand individuals. Some estimates suggest even fewer. Not every scientist agrees on the exact number, and not everyone believes the Toba eruption alone caused the bottleneck. That's an important distinction. Science rarely deals in absolute certainty. New evidence constantly reshapes old ideas. Some archaeological sites show humans continuing to thrive in parts of of Africa, despite the eruption. Certain climate models suggest regional impacts varied considerably. The debate continues. But regardless of whether Toba was the sole cause or one major contributor, the broader picture remains extraordinary. Humanity came dangerously close to disappearing, and every line of evidence points toward an extended period when survival became unimaginably difficult. Think about what that actually means. Every family alive today has moments where someone almost wasn't born. A delayed train, a chance meeting, a different decision. History changes constantly because of tiny accidents. Now multiply that uncertainty across an entire species. If enough ancient families failed to survive, everything that followed disappears. No pyramids, no philosophy, no music, no medicine, no satellites orbiting Earth, no cities glowing beneath the night sky. Every achievement in human history depends on one simple fact. Someone survived long enough to have children again and again and again. So how did they do it? How did a species with no agriculture, no governments, no written knowledge, no permanent homes outlast one of the greatest environmental disasters in human history? The answer wasn't strength. It wasn't speed. It wasn't luck alone. It was flexibility. Humans possessed something evolution had been quietly building for hundreds of thousands of years: behavioral adaptability. When prey disappeared, they hunted something else. When forests changed, they explored new environments. When familiar plants vanished, they experimented with unfamiliar ones. Other animals often rely on instincts refined over millions of years. Humans rely on learning. That difference sounds small. During stable times, it almost is. During catastrophe, it changes everything. Imagine two species facing the same collapsing environment. One depends on a specific ecosystem. The other depends on ideas. The first species must wait for nature to recover. The second begins inventing new ways to survive. Our ancestors didn't know climate science. They didn't understand volcanoes. They couldn't explain why the world had changed, but they could observe, experiment, remember, teach. A successful hunting technique discovered today could save lives tomorrow. A safer migration route remembered by one elder might preserve an entire community. Knowledge itself became an evolutionary advantage. And unlike claws or teeth, knowledge could spread faster than genetics ever could. One person learned, everyone benefited. That may have been humanity's greatest survival tool. Not intelligence by itself, shared intelligence. Around campfires that still burned beneath unfamiliar skies, stories became more than entertainment. They became survival manuals. Which valleys still held water? Which animals remained dangerous? Which plants could still be eaten? Every conversation increased someone else's chance of seeing another sunrise. Culture had become a survival technology. There's another reason humanity may have endured. We cooperated at a scale few animals could match. Most predators compete with one another. Humans increasingly depended on each other. Food was shared. Children were protected collectively. Injured individuals were sometimes cared for instead of abandoned. Archaeological discoveries reveal ancient humans who survived serious injuries for years after they could no longer hunt effectively. Someone kept them alive. That tells us something profound. Human survival wasn't built solely on individual strength. It was built on community. In the harshest moments, compassion itself became adaptive. A child raised by an entire group had better odds than one raised alone. An experienced elder who could no longer hunt still carried decades of knowledge. Keeping that person alive benefited everyone. Our ancestors weren't simply evolving bigger brains. They were evolving better societies. Slowly, without realizing it, humanity was becoming something no other species had ever been. A network of minds rather than isolated individuals. And perhaps that was enough. Enough to outlast a colder world. Enough to survive failing ecosystems. Enough to carry our species through one of its darkest chapters. The volcano had transformed the planet, but it had also revealed something hidden inside us. Our greatest adaptation wasn't physical. It was our ability to change ourselves. There's one final thought that makes this story even stranger. Right now, somewhere on Earth, there are nearly 8 billion people. We speak thousands of languages. We live in deserts, rainforests, mountains, islands, and cities visible from space. We've split the atom, walked on the moon, sent spacecraft beyond the edge of our solar system, built machines capable of talking back to us. It feels inevitable, as if humanity was always destined to dominate the planet. But evolution has no destiny. It has outcomes, and outcomes can change. If the eruption beneath ancient Sumatra had been slightly larger, if the climate had remained unstable just a little longer, if one migrating group had failed to find water, if one generation had produced fewer surviving children, history might have ended before it truly began. Every civilization you've ever heard of existed only because unnamed people refused to disappear. People whose names were never written, whose faces will never be known, who never imagined that one day their descendants would build telescopes capable of seeing galaxies billions of light years away, or hospitals that could replace failing hearts, or libraries containing nearly all human knowledge. They weren't trying to create civilization. They were trying to survive one more season, one more winter, one more sunrise. And somehow, that was enough. Today, scientists continue debating exactly how severe the Toba eruption's effects were. Some evidence suggests parts of Africa remained relatively stable. Other evidence points toward dramatic environmental disruption across much of the ancient world. Like many questions about prehistory, the complete picture is still being assembled. That's how science works. It doesn't freeze in certainty. It improves as new discoveries are made. But one fact remains beyond debate. Every human alive today descends from an incredibly small number of ancient survivors. Whether they escaped a volcanic winter, adapted through changing climates, or endured a series of hardships we still don't fully understand, they succeeded where countless others did not. And because they did, you're here. Think about that the next time life feels ordinary. The coffee you drink, the language you speak, the music you love, the friendships you've made, the person sitting beside you. Every ordinary moment exists because an unbroken chain of survival stretches backward through thousands of generations. Every parent found enough food. Every child lived long enough to grow up. Every generation passed something forward. Not perfection, not certainty, just another chance. For almost all of history, humanity lived one failed season away from extinction. Yet somehow, our ancestors adapted again and again and again. Perhaps that's the real story. Not that one volcano nearly erased humanity, but that humanity became the kind of species capable of surviving a world that seemed determined to erase it. Our greatest invention wasn't the wheel, or agriculture, or writing. It was the ability to learn faster than the world could change around us. That ability carried us through collapsing ecosystems, shifting climates, ice ages, pandemics, and countless disasters history has already forgotten. And it continues to shape every challenge we face today. Because the same species that once stood beneath a sky darkened by volcanic ash now studies that volcano from satellites orbiting hundreds of kilometers above the Earth. The same minds that once feared the darkness now investigate the deepest oceans and the farthest stars. The journey from survival to civilization wasn't guaranteed. It was earned, one generation at a time, one adaptation at a time, one impossible decision after another. 74,000 years ago, our ancestors looked up at a sky filled with ash and had no idea whether tomorrow would come. Today, you can look up at that same sky knowing something they never could. Against extraordinary odds, they made it. And because they did, so did you.